Thank you. We switched already to the discussion of the European Union partly, or at least a special example in Finland, which exists also in some way as a process in other countries. But I will speak about the European Union as a whole, and especially on the long-term anticipation studies, which is interesting because since the financial crisis, the European Union cares about long-term development and has also introduced 4 years ago a forum, especially for anticipation studies, which is a discussion forum. And I think this confirms that anticipation plays also in European Union politics an important role. But my basic argument will be that this future studies of the European Union have a very strong deficiency. They are mainly oriented toward economic competitiveness and employability, and therefore they do not discuss people and human and social capital, but they are mainly speaking about things. It's impersonal, every long-time perspective of the European Union is blind what concerns the people living in the European Union. They speak about this European citizen, but not as an economic actor which is active in forming the future. So I will discuss these points on four sections, short sections. I will give an outline about the 3 studies of 25, 30 and especially 2050. And then I will refer to the economic implication of competitiveness, mainly innovation in technology mainly. The third point will be I refer to the lacking discussion of human capital and a specific kind of qualification toward, as I mentioned already, toward employability. And finally, I will make some short remarks in how far we could correct these long-term studies toward a more important education, mainly human-centered education, using your term, but we have also in other areas a comparable discussion, beginning with the Enlightenment that the personality should be developed and not only the worker in firms and in public government. So first, as I mentioned already, the European Union started after the introduction of the currency union in 2000 or 1990, long-term studies which lasted about 10 years. The first is the Lisbon strategy until 2010, which largely failed for many reasons. At the same time, 2 years later, 2002, they introduced the strategy for sustainable development, which aimed at a socio-ecological market economy. There were very little progresses until 2012, 10-12, because the crisis 2008 reduced every activity toward the socio-ecological orientation in the European Union. But with the crisis 2008, the long-term studies were first the world in 2025 Raising Asia and Socio-Ecological Transition, which concentrates on the competition with Asia and the needed structural changes, less resource inputs, possibly higher employment. The second was just a year later, it was the González report, the former Prime Minister in Spain. It's the Project 2030, which reports for the European Council, for the highest decision body in the European Union, and focus on the socio-ecological model in Europe, but in very general terms. For example, the integration is there at the forefront, more integration, more cooperation in the European Union between the member states. And the third study is the Global Europe 2050 and 2011, which concentrates on European policies and the special research priorities. And all three studies, but mainly the last one I mentioned, see a shrinking economic and demographic role of Europe, and the basic strategy is to enhance investments in science, research, and technology. So the view is that Europe can be globally a global player by more science and research and technology, but I will refer, this is just an enhancement of the European industry. Like the Europe 2020 strategy from 2010, education plays nearly no role. Everyone in Europe is asked to engage in innovation in industry and service sector, naturally, and nothing else is important. There are a few remarks to have also science and technology for the enhancement of politics of the governments and something like this, but also just a strategy to enhance technological progress in this sense. There is one argument in Europe for this limited education, because the member states are responsible for European education policy and not the European Union. But this could not be an excuse, because they intervene in Brussels very much in the Erasmus strategy, which is also a device to enhance the circulation of brains within Europe and in the world. And so they intervened very strongly by the framework program for education. So it's a clear priority to have economic competitiveness at the global level. So interesting is that this strategy, 2050 mainly, discusses the grand challenges, as they are called. It is climate change, healthcare, aging society, and scarcity of natural resources. And they have a program for a paradigm shift to what role and place science should have in Europe. You know, it's again a definition by the Advisory Council, ERAP, in 2009 to engage in this innovation activities in science and in technology. There have been also a differentiation in this study into 6 main dimensions for the future, which are comparable to those in other regions of the world. It's demography, energy and resources, economy and technology, geopolitics, mobility, dynamics, migration, and research and education. Among these anticipations for 2050, there are 3 scenarios for the future until 2050, and these are, the one is we do not make anything. The second one, Europe is drifting toward national interests. And the third one is the Renaissance, European Renaissance. And it insists on this Renaissance program and have 2 key messages. The first is investing in knowledge, one is again. And the second one is political and cultural integration, also supported by science and technology. So if you look closer on those dimensions for investing in knowledge, we see the importance of science for shaping policy. You know, there's a big advisory apparatus in the European Union to advise politics in a certain sense always, very strongly. I have been in several advising bodies, and I know in how far you are allowed to give an advice which goes a bit beyond the concerned Director General. They are very strictly, and also national institutions are intervening to you as an advisor for those institutions. The second one is regain cognitive leadership by different kinds of sciences, which concerns natural and social sciences in the sense of snow. This is still a paradigm in the European Union, to create and disseminate knowledge by open innovation, open research, and things like this network, European Institute of Technology, the EIT, which became a very important institution. Then massive investment in knowledge in the educational system for enhancing the economic competitiveness. And finally, long-term visions, as these 3 mentioned already, 2050 especially. They are always targeted toward economic competitiveness. It is always, even if you have resource saving, it is always for gaining competitiveness on the global level. It is never a look at the European population, it's just a side effect. And by this, there is a strong need to shift the innovation activities toward the human capital in general, and mainly for general education, and not for financial investments and things like this, which is very well known. So the third point, I will make it short. European Union takes not much care about education, but it has a program to enhance employability. It is the main target for the autonomous national university system and vocational education system to enhance competitiveness. There are programs on the European level, and it is never discussed human-centered or personality development or things like this. There has been in the 90s a very interesting proposal by the industrialists, which went even further toward employability, but the ministers were strongly against, and so we have some balance to general education, but it is very limited. So what we can result out for 2 minutes now, which are left, is what could be done or what should be done at the European Union, because it is considered as a strict iron cage for economic laws, European-wide and globally. So it should be an open process. It should be an open process made by the people, and this needs a human-centered or a personally-oriented approach for education, which is a precondition for economic competitiveness. It is largely neglected that everyone who is a good researcher went through the educational system beginning from the kindergarten. Nothing else can be successful. What we can imagine as an orientation, a content orientation for education is, I will name it first, it's the Enlightenment. We should not forget that the Enlightenment, the Scottish, the French and the German Enlightenment had very clear idea, not only Smith, but also Voltaire, and especially Kant and Humboldt. They have very clear idea, not only the content, but also the organizational structure. We should remind that Harvard University is a Humboldtian model. By combining education and research, and all over the world, this model has been very successful. The second one, Gary, you have contributed quite a lot to this subject. I will not try to explain it here, but it's on a way to develop some kind of human-centered education. And in the first instance, I would say Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum, they made very good contributions. For example, Sen, I will finish just now, Sen divided between general education, which is for freedom and welfare. We are again back to the discussion of freedom, personal freedom. Then the second one is education for social life, especially democracy. And the third one is economic. You know, it's on the third place, which is in the European Union in the first place. This is, the hierarchy is completely different. And I think we are not now able to have a clear paradigm how to educate the young people. But one should remind that 200 years ago, all over Europe, mainly in Europe, and beginning also in the United States, it was education. It was always the people who enhanced also economic development, but also democracy and social life, security, welfare, and so on. So we have also a tradition in economics. It's the labor values theory. You know, it's not out of the world. Schumpeter said, for example, the mother is the earth, and the father is the work. This is treatment which is a paradigm in many writings. So it's the combination between nature and work, and not nature and machine. Machine is just an intermediary instrument to enhance labor, to form in a certain manner the nature. And I think for the next 35 years for the European Union until 2050, it is urgently needed to have such kind of education integrated to the benefit of people, but also of the economy. It is not a contradiction to educate people, it is a precondition to be economically successful. Thank you.